Okay, so 28 years later is not 28 years after the initial release of the first film. That would be 22 years and 7 months, depending on which release you're talking about. Either the UK or the USA release, because there's two different times for 28 days later releases, as well as the releases for 28 weeks later. This movie, because 28 weeks later does happen, still within 28 weeks after, because 28 weeks equals 7 months. 28 years later is in fact still 28 years after both 28 days and 28 weeks later. But anyway, so as you may know, I'm gonna go into IMDb here to read off the list. You have Jodie Comer as Isla, who is a woman with cancer. Spoiler alert. And her son is played. Her son Spike is played by Alfie Williams. More on him in a bit. You got Aaron Taylor Johnson as her husband Jamie. And later on, you'll find out that Ralph Fiennes plays Dr. Kelson, who, believe it or not, is a good guy. And Waco Hines as young Jimmy. That's important later because there was another actor from the movie Sinners. His name is Jack O'Connell. He plays an older version of Jimmy, who you'll see later. And I don't believe I'm spoiling that because, well, you can easily find that out. And well, I am spoiling it, but you'll find out eventually. This movie is made to be part one of a trilogy. Most people, I think, will go in knowing that is at least two parts, but they probably won't know it's three parts. Especially if you saw it on a Thursday, which is the first time I saw it. I've seen it twice now, and the first time I saw it, I got this collectible poster. Because I dared to see it early, so to speak, according to AMC. It was a night only fan event, open night only fan event. And it's definitely different from 28 days later as well as 28 weeks later. But it's because it's, post apocalyptic, meaning that you got your initial outbreak, then you got so much time after the outbreak when everything is still tearing down to the point where people are now post apocalyptic. I hope I said that right. They were settled in a certain central location where everybody just has decided to live. And they've come up with a system. The kids are learning how to play certain roles. Pardon me as I eat my Hershey's cookies and cream kisses. They all gotta learn to survive. So the so-called wage virus is the perpetrator in this entire franchise. That's the enemy, right? When you get into the when you get to the devil in the details, you realize that the virus has rendered its victims, the rage zombies, the rage zombies, they call them zombies, the mad zombies, they're rendered as, well, they're not human anymore. They're kind of, I find them kind of caveman like, because, especially the alpha, they're just around, wandering around all naked. The way they eat things raw. But they eat things raw because they gotta eat still. They're not technically zombies because they're not technically dead. The only reason why the original zombies in the first movie were dying of starvation is because there was nothing else to eat around them. And these wage zombies have evolved to the point where they've learned to find food, such as deer that you see them eating, and they eat them just like animals. It's like they're not really human, but they seem to have, the wage virus has revolted them back to their caveman, Neanderthal like, beast like nature. And they're naked because they're of course dirty, they haven't showered, but they have a tendency to still look for fish in water and eat them raw. They don't cook anything, but they eat things raw, like a caveman, I guess, before caveman discovered fire. And so it's almost like these particular, these types of man have revolted back to their caveman-like status. They've regressed. While other humans have progressed, they've developed a settlement that is, it's off the island. It's protected by this one road strip that during high tide is covered up by water, and so the zombies won't cross over, but neither can the humans. And they can only the people from the island can only cross over to the mainland for like purposes of hunting and gathering supplies and food and whatnot during low tide, when the water is moved away from the strip and they can walk safely across. And I mention that because Jamie wants to take his son Spike, played by Alfie Williams. I believe his name is Alfie Williams, yeah. And he wants to take him to the mainland because he wants him to hunt. He's been training all his life to use a bow and arrow, and he's like, remember, son, aim for the head or heart. Which is what all the kids learn. You see this whole training montage that's weirdly but brilliantly mixed with old footage of medieval soldiers shooting arrows into the air, which it looks weird at first, but it mixes it in to show you that they're trying to imitate what those soldiers on that old movie footage were doing. So I believe that those were videos that the adults were showing to the kids to show them as part of their instruction on how to use bows and arrows. Because that when you're being instructed nowadays with media, you're going to show them how to do it with the actual object, but before that you're going to show them on video first, so that you have like something to go by when you start to put your hands on it and start to actually learn how to string the bow and shoot it and all that. Shoot the arrow from the bow. Yeah. Kind of like if you're learning to shoot a gun, you're going to watch footage of people shooting a gun, video instructions, but then you're going to actually put your hands on it and learn how to clean the gun and cock it and put the bullet in and shoot it and blah, blah, blah. It's just like that. The kids got to learn from an early age of how to hunt, just in case they're chosen sort of a rite of passage to go out there and, hunt. Just like Alfie's character, Spike, has to. And, I thought that Jamie's taking his son just to because they're going to gather resources. From the trailer, I thought that they were learning to gather. I thought that they were gathering resources, and also they were trying to survive the horde of mad zombies, which they end up having to do. There's this nice little sequence of eventually they see a batch of zombies, and this is after they see deer. How deer hold around a certain area. Some of those deer were killed by the alpha mad zombie. He has a tendency to whip the head off with the spine still attached from his victims. Now they see a zombie, the first zombie, and it screams, and then They all start running. But there's this lone figure amongst them that's just standing there, right? And he screams, ordering the other zombies to attack. So he's the alpha, the one that screamed, the one that was standing there like a lone figure. And this is after Alfie. Now that I remember, Ralph is steadily testing his son. They find a man hanging upside down with some kind of weird markings on his chest. It spells out like IMMY. I watched it the second time and I paid attention to the letters, and I realized it was spelling Jimmy. And I figured that out because, Jimmy from the beginning, who is at the end. Spoiler alert. Anyway, Spike kills him with an arrow, but when he kills him and shoots him through the head, it has this weird, they call it bullet time, but with an arrow, but it's really more of like a photo snapshot of as soon as the arrow hits his head, it snaps shots and it turns it around, it turns around a different angle. And it does that a few times, That's what makes this movie look so different. That's what makes these films different, is that Alex Garland as a writer is just making his films look different. And I know it's directed by Danny Boyle, but and Alex Garland, I paid attention when I saw Civil War last year. He likes to put music in his movies. And the same music that he played in Civil War, not the exact same music, but similar music he played in Civil War, is also in this movie 28 years later. Similar music, and I'm like, it may not sound like it's in place, but that music is not what I have a problem with. One of the sound things that I did have an issue with is like when Spike shoots the first fat zombie in the neck. That's that thing that's crawling around. If you saw the trailer, you saw its back. Or like something was crawling around. And people were right. People that saw the trailer that guessed that, they were right. They have evolved. That fat zombie, like when he first shoots it, it screams like a pig. It literally, it's a fat zombie. So it's like a pig. And it screams like a pig. And one thing I hate about zombie films is they always make them either growl, like Walking Dead, or they squeal like a pig when they're shot. It's kind of like they did the same thing in Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City. A certain zombie is like, just has this high-pitched sound, like, I'm like, that's a bit too much. That's not how they would sound, It's like the same recycled audio files for this one creature. And I'm like, can you not get any more creative than that? Just like, and this is a fat zombie, so it's like, of all things, you got to go with a pig squeal, a high-pitched pig squeal, which that high-pitched pig squeal ends up, as a scream. It alerts the other nearby zombies, because Ralph tells his son, "Now we have to go." That scream would have alerted any of those zombies in the nearby area, and it does. That's why the alpha hold it and the other zombies hold it. By the way, the first zombies were the fat zombies. And really enough, there was this fat zombie that was kind of like the daughter of one of them. Like, she was a little girl, because I saw her breast, but the way her hair had grown, obviously her hair seemed like it was rotted off. Kind of like the zombies that were rotting away in Resident Evil Raccoon City, when the people were like, losing their minds, going crazy. It's just, crazy. And so Danny, so Ralph, they end up going back to the same little house that they were in, because they went into that house originally to look for resources. And Wow found a frisbee, asked his son, he tells his son it's a frisbee. And of course Spike doesn't know what a frisbee is, but Ralph is like, you'll love it, once you learn how to use it. And I looked at that house and I'm like, is that the same house that they had to escape from? Because I had seen it the other day, and I'm like, yeah, they just backtracked to that same house. Because they come out of it after that kill, and they go. No, that scream didn't load any of the scream for the zombie. I'm trying to remember. Didn't load anything. Not from the fat zombie. Didn't load anybody. Because they go to that house after they kill those fat zombies. It's There's another squeal, another scream that for some reason it's like, I forgot what it was. Of how, oh no, they're trying to they're about to head back home, is what it is. And they see the zombie, they see a stray zombie just standing there, and Ralph orders his son to be still, not move. But then the zombie sees him anyway, and they start to move whenever the alpha zombie screams. And so then they go back to the house, because it's like, because that Ralph says go back to back to the woods, and they end up going back to the house. And they climb up the stairs, and they find out that there's the door to the attic. Ralph helps his son up there. He falls down, but he helps him back up again. All the while, Ralph is just shooting zombies with arrows. And eventually, they end up stranded inside of the attic. And they're out of arrows, so they have to wait it out. The alpha zombie is just standing there. Yeah. Did I say Ralph? I meant the alpha zombie is just standing there waiting. And so Jamie's like, so we wait too. And it's funny because Alpha, is he the alpha now? Because anyway, yeah, I found an Alfie Williams is the actor who plays Spike. I mentioned that earlier. Anyway, the roof ends up falling in while they are asleep inside the attic, and they have to leave before they fall through the floor. And so they get out of the house, but the noise alerts the alpha, and so they end up backtracking where they came from. And of course, the tide is coming in, and he's like, Jamie's like, we can make it. It's filling up, but we can make it. It's not that bad. They can basically run through the water, because his son's like, well, the high tide is in, but no, he's like, we can make it. So because it hasn't reached full peak yet, so the water's still kind of settling in, and they can still run across, and they do. They go all the way. But then, just when they start to cross, we see the alpha hot on the trail. He's going to the same areas, and he ends up running through the woods, and he's running full throttle. And he's smart. He's not just running like the other zombies. He's literally, he takes it. He pauses. He stops and looks around and figures out where they are and just follows them. And then he's running after them, and damn near catches up to him. Because these things don't get tired like normal humans. The way Devour seems to be acting weird, it kind of cuts off any inhibitory factors that a person can have, like tiredness, and they just operate completely on rage, almost animalistic like, it's kind of like barbaric like. In the old films, you would see things like these rage zombies actually doing violent forms of killing, like they'd be beating this head of somebody, biting them, and gashing out eyeballs and whipping open mouths and shit. But this one they don't leave; they just bite you, and that's it. So it's not as entertaining to watch them like be violent because they're not as violent, minus the whole head being whipped off. Anyway, they make it back. The Alpha almost catches up with them, but of course, Jamie blows his whistle to alert the other people, and he yells Alpha, and so they know to get the arrows. They start shooting them with arrows. It doesn't stop them, but then they get this big ass spear thing full of flames, and it pierces his chest and knocks them down enough for them to get through. And Jamie's banging on the gate door, and he's like, "Let us in." He's like, "Look," and the woman's like saying, "Wait, wait," because she needs to check their eyes to make sure they're not infected. And she's like, "Look at my eyes. Look at his eyes. Look at our eyes. We're fine." And she finally lets them through, and then they have a party, to celebrate Spike's first, kill and time out there. He's seen as a hero. He's lifted up in the chair and passed through like. He's at a lot. He's a singer at a live concert. There's some issues though. Like I said, Spike's mom, Jamie's wife, is sick with cancer, and they don't know that. Well, later on it's revealed that his mom kind of suspected it, but she didn't want to tell her son. A part of her didn't want to tell her son because her mind seems to be in two places. She goes from past to present because she regresses back to the past, and she thinks at one point that her son, Spike, is her dad. So her name is Isla. And, she's not really suffering from a mental illness per se. The cancer is either spread from her body to her brain or from her brain to her body. And it's kind of like, she's pretty fucked up. She still recognizes her husband, but there's times when she yells at him. She initially yelled at him at the beginning because she didn't agree that Spike should go out there even on his first day, his first kill, because he was only 12. And most of the young, they wait until they're about 14 or 15 to take him to the outside world for the first time. But, Spike got the special treatment. His dad felt like 12 years old was a good enough time, and his mom didn't like that. She was like, "He's just a baby. You're a baby killer." She's like yelling at him and stuff, and you can tell the way she's acting, how she's bedridden, so that something's wrong with her. And so when they get back to into the village after the celebration, Spike speaks with a certain guy who's like, because he saw something burning, and he asked his dad about it earlier when they were staying inside that house before the roof caved in. And Jamie quickly dismisses it, saying that he's never been there before, despite Spike wanting to really know. He asks the guy, and so the guy tells him the story of this doctor who was like this GM or GP, and he used to be a good doctor, but then he went insane, started burning bodies, and Spike remembers that. Spike witnesses his dad committing adultery by making out with another woman that he knows the name of. And he brings this up later when his dad makes breakfast. His dad makes breakfast. There's two scenes when his dad makes breakfast. The first scene, he doesn't burn up the eggs. Now I want some eggs. Great. But the second scene of him making breakfast, he does burn up the eggs. And, Spike uses that time to ask his son to ask his dad about how he, why he didn't tell him the truth about the doctor. And, Jamie recounts this story about him and two other guys. They're out there surviving, and they see this lone doctor that waves at them all casually. He's got this body of bodies lined up, and they're so freaked out that they just run away. They just run off. They don't greet the guy. They just run away from him, and they never go back. And it's kind of vague. It's like, you could have given me more than that. Like, how did you know he was a doctor? Like, I know you know he's boning bodies because you saw him boning bodies, but how do you know he's a doctor? How do you know who he is? I guess the guy told him so. And Jamie didn't like that guy telling his son the story. Um, and then of course Jamie in a smart ass. Spike in a smart ass way brings up his dad's infidelity, his adultery, you know, and he slaps his son because he's like Jamie says to his son, "You watch your mouth," and he just says something else, and then he slaps his son Spike for continuing to basically bring up that woman, and I don't remember all what he said, but he cries about it. He says it's gonna be. He goes up to his mom, up to her room, and says, "You know what? It's gonna be okay, mom." And then he pushes his dad out of the door because his Jamie goes in to check on his wife because obviously his wife is like screaming. And I think her head. She has these occasional headaches where she's just like having a severe headache, and they come and go. And he checks on his wife, but eventually the son pushes him out the door and says, "You stay the fuck away from us." And he pulls a knife on him, but which Jamie takes away, but with shaking hands. And for some reason the camera shakes also on the shaking hand. It's like it's kind of weird, but whatever. And he hands the knife back to his son Spike, and he's like, "Dad, just go." So the father, not wanting to escalate the situation, he just leaves, but he punches the upper wall twice, and it's kind of like it's got a temple. Aaron Taylor Johnson looks like he has that temple. He really does. But yeah. So then after that, Spike pretty much plots a way to get his mom to see the doctor that he was told about, who was on the mainland. And what he does is he sets fire to one of the village's things, and he goes off telling people about the fire to get them to go to the fire to distract them. And then he even tells the guy that keeps watch. He's like, I can keep watch up there and man the siren. He's like, okay, because originally the guy's like, I can't leave my post, but then he decides to leave his post. But he says to Spike, keep your eye on that siren, But of course Spike doesn't climb it. He sneaks out with his mom, and his mom is like, well, where are we going? And she's like, we're going to the beach, Mom. Just lying to his mom. And then when they go to the mainland, she's like, this is not the beach. This is the mainland. We're not supposed to be on the mainland. That's what she says. So even though she's cuckoo, she can tell certain things, like, when she's when they are on the mainland, they're not supposed to. But he convinces his mom that we're going to go see a doctor because something's wrong with her. He tells his mom that something's wrong with you, and we're going to go see a doctor about it. Well, what happens is that she follows along with it. So they eventually walk, and they find this little area to spend the night in, and you see a fat zombie. The guy. I'm sorry, the son. I'm jumping ahead of myself. The son Spike. He says he's gonna keep watch. They both. He sleeps with his mom first. They sleep. So there's these nice little moments of when you see them napping. Sleeping. The movie is an hour and 55 minutes, right? So it's nearly 2 hours. But then he wakes up and decides to keep watch so his mom can sleep. Nice little gesture of where the son does it for his mom. But what happens is and he's still protecting his mom throughout this film. He has to because she has no way to defend herself. Even though she does save his life. Now, I'll get to that in a bit. So there's this fat zombie crawling around, about to bite Spike. And I don't think the thing can see. I think it's blind. And I think the reason why it crawls is maybe it's lost use of its legs in a way. And it's funny because the thing stands up, as we saw earlier in the film. Um, but I think it stands up because I think it crawls on its belly because it's blind and it needs to be able to, like, you know, sniff on the ground or look on the ground, so it has a tendency to. Well, they eat worms, so. But anyway, he starts to chew on his shoelaces because he thinks it's a worm, but then he realizes it's not, and then he starts to make his way towards Spike, and then just when he's about to bite Spike, there's this blue bag that is put over its head, and it just kind of fast forward. Oh no! And the entire time that it's making its way to Spike, there's this camel things that keeps going from Spike to his mom, to like the tent that his mom is in, to like this overhead shot, to like back to the zombie, and it keeps doing that to the point where it's just distracting. And the first time I remember seeing, I'm like, "Where is Spike? Is he close to the thing, or is this thing farther away?" And it's just steadily getting closer and closer to him. Well, turns out Spike was never that far from it. So it's just the camera angles are making it look like he was, because it keeps having some meaning. I'm like, really, all those angles are unnecessary. But anyway, once the blue bag is put over its head, Ralph and his mom wake up. They're safe, and I thought that the doctor, played by Ralph Fiennes, Ralphie Alfie, it's funny. I thought that was him that did that saved them, that saved the son, that saved Spike. But no, it was actually Spike's mom, Isla, that saves him. And when he asks her what happened, she doesn't remember. For some reason does not remember saving him. But apparently at one point she saw the zombie, and her maternal instincts kicked in, and she had to save her son as a good mom should, and just put the bag over the zombie's head and just banged its brains to the point where it died. And because Spike and his mom, they see the corpse of the zombie. Funny I say corpse, as it's with blood under the blue bag, and she doesn't remember doing it, so it's weird. I guess the adrenaline caused it was too much for her brain, and she just forgot about it. But she started to have like kind of little flashes, or maybe she didn't want to tell him. I don't know. So it's like he's trying to protect her, but she saves him. Anyway, they end up going to this. They end up somehow getting more zombies attracted to them. The alpha ends up. Well, after that, there's also these soldiers that are sent in, or for some reason that they end up shooting at the zombies. That most of them are wiped out. Very few of them make it, and you see a few soldiers bitten, and they start to tone, and then other soldiers shoot them dead before they can complete their transformation. Oh yeah, and before the scene where Alfie is like they're at the area where they spent the night, you see this batch of zombies they're picking fish from the nearby stream, and there was this pregnant female zombie. She's got this little shroud over her shoulder, while the other ones are naked, and obviously to set her apart visually, because you immediately think that that's the alpha's wife, his wife. So they've evolved from their initial infection zombies to be more organized in a way, because she is obviously his spouse, and she's pregnant with his baby, so they've bred at some point. Yeah. So anyway, the soldiers make it out alive almost. They end up backing up in the darkness, and you got that trailer shot of like them shooting at something, and then the Alpha is there, and Alpha whips off one of them's heads. as a signature move is. It's like a fatality from Mortal Kombat, you know. I think it was Scorpion's move, one of his signature moves, one of his fatalities. Not instant KO, but like a TKO. Anyway, yeah, they make it back, and then they're running away from the zombies. Uh, because there was this point where like they're still looking for the doctor, and that zombie that people thought was Cillian Murphy. You know the zombie I'm talking about. I'll show you. I'll show you it to him. This zombie here. This zombie wakes up. I don't know why this is so famous, and he ends up nearly biting. He's coming right behind Isla, Spike's mom, and Spike shoots the zombie in the chest, but it screams, and that alerts other zombies, including the Alpha, and it's just you know, it's a nice shot, by the way, of the zombie in this you know, field of flowers. Anyway, so yeah, he saves his mom, but he I saw it the second time is like, you know, the blood from the zombie has splattered onto her forehead, and she's about to like wipe it off, but no, he wipes it off. He says, "No, mom, don't blink," because if he would have blinked, then the blood would get in her eye, and then she'd become infected. And then he says, "You're fine," because he wiped all the blood off. So it's that attention to detail I noticed the second time around. That's why you got to see films a second time. You'll notice things you didn't the first time. Anyway, he wipes the blood off her head, and you know this is, you know, to keep her from getting infected. And the zombies hear him, so they make their way into this gas station where there's this gas that's literally built up over the years. I think it's benzene maybe. And I say that because, you know, they're coughing as they enter, and so the zombies, they cough as well, but the zombies are trying to go after them. And then there was one soldier that happened to survive. His other soldiers, his fellow soldiers were killed, but his comrades were killed, but he makes it out. And he saves their life because he tells them to get down, and he shoots at the gas to, you know, make the zombies go ablaze to kill them. He explains that this is benzene built up over the years, that, you know, it evaporated over the years and stuck in the air. And it couldn't escape because the door was closed. But, you know, he introduces himself as Eric. And, you know, this cast is like Scottish. The characters are like Scottish, so it's like, you know, he pronounces Eric, but it's Eric. They pronounce it Eric, and we pronounce it Eric. Trying to find the actor's name. I can't find him, but he's worth a note because he's in the film for a little while anyway. And I'll get to that in a bit. So Eric saves their life. He's played by Edwin Whiting. Edwin Whiting. You know, he saves her life, and he's steadily asking, you know, about his mom and like, what do we do now? And what the fuck happens now? Because, you know, he doesn't want to scream, because if he does, then the zombies come after him. So, you know, he's steadily cussing in front of his kid. And Spike, you know, Spike and Eric kind of become friends. Eric ends up carrying Isla, Spike's mom. He later finds out that she can walk because Isla, you know, she remarks on how Eric is a dick, you know, which is funny because as you see these naked, you know, zombies, these wage virus zombies, one, you can see their penises all swinging around, right? Especially the alpha zombie. just swinging around in the breeze, and so to speak. And there's this bonding moment between the two, right? Between Spike and Eric, his new friend. I'm sorry, I'm just really tired. I'm trying to hurry up and finish this. I'm trying to wrap this up. Anyway, it's actually pretty funny because Spike doesn't know what the internet is. He doesn't know what the radio is. They have this cool little moment where they picnic out for a bit, and that's when Eric finds out that Isla can actually walk. But Eric shows Spike a picture of his fiance, his ex-fiance, and the audience laughed at this moment because Eric Spike is asking what's wrong with her face, and his fiance had surgery on her face, plastic surgery, to where she got that lip abduction, the lip surgery, and Spike is referring to her mouth. He's 12 years old, so it's kind of like it's funny because he doesn't know. He's not used to the outside, so he doesn't know what people on the outside look like, and he says it's weird, and Eric says you're weird, and he says there's a girl like that on my island. Sometimes she's allergic to shellfish, and her mouth gets all swollen. So Alfie's character Spike just adorably thinks it's. He fucking thinks that's what happened to her because he's like, what's wrong with her face? And this is a good little bonding moment, but they hear a scream as they're walking, and they go to investigate, or at least Isla does. She goes to investigate, and they find the zombie pregnant woman, the pregnant female zombie, the one with the shroud around her shoulders. Turns out it was the alpha's partner. He bred with her. She's pregnant and she's about to give birth. And there's this little moment of humanity when Isla reaches her hands out to steady the female wage zombie that's about to give birth, because there's this nice little. How some women they can't just be posted their back to the wall when they're pregnant. They have to part their legs, but I've seen it before. Sometimes people will hold their hands so that they can position themselves to the point where they can spread their legs while they're bent over in a certain position to give birth, because the legs got to be split, to really give the vagina way for the baby to come out, and to also push. And I guess in certain cultures, or maybe the old ways, the woman would stand up because the gravity would help pull the baby out, when you don't have a doctor. It's how does a woman deliver the baby herself? She has to know what position to be in. I guess she has to put herself in the wall if you don't have that person hold your hands. But Isla's holding her hands because she understands, because Isla's a mother herself. So she's like, I can relate. She's empathizing with this wage zombie that's pregnant, about to give birth, and she's helping her out. And then, she helps deliver the baby, and she tells Spike, quickly cut the placenta. And he cuts Spike cuts the placenta, not really knowing what it is, by the way, I don't think. Maybe he does, I don't know. Do they teach sex ed or anything about the human reproductive cycle in the little village? They have schools, so they have to eventually. Anyway, so they help her give birth, and Isla cleans the baby off. She asks Spike for water, and Spike gives her a bottle of water, and she puts it on the baby's head and starts to clean off the face and body. And she has it in this little blanket, which is a part of her coat, and she's like, shaking the baby, coddling it, comforting it, keep it from screaming. Of course, the screaming will alert the alpha zombie later. Or whatever. But there's this moment when Eric is he's witnessing all this, because he's like, you're all fucking crazy. And the zombie, the raging zombie, the pregnant zombie wakes up and resumes her rageful self, and she's like, hey, And so Eric shoots her on instinct. He shoots her quickly. And then he orders Isla to drop the baby. I gotta kill it. And she's like, it's a fucking baby. And he's like, we cannot allow them to breed. We have to kill it now. And he wants to kill it. And so Isla won't let him, and then Spike tells his mom. I keep wanting to call him Alfie or Ralphie for some reason, because Ralph Fiennes, and then Alfie Williams, who's basically Spike in this movie. So Spike has to, he tells his mother to go, and he's like backing her up, providing cover and protecting her, and Eric is threatening to shoot them, and he's back. He's, for some fucking reason, look, Eric has got them at gunpoint, right? And they're backing up away from him, but for some reason he's backing up, like freaking out, backing up. I'm like, why would you really? Because in reality, he would not back up. He'd be holding the gun, demanding for them to drop the baby, or he's gonna shoot them all. He's like, I'll fucking kill all of you, but he's freaking out, rather ridiculously. And what it's setting up. You know why he's doing it, because the alpha is gonna grab him. The alpha zombie's gonna grab him. It's like daddy's home, and he pulls him up, whips his head off screen, and you see that because the alpha drops down with his head in his hands, and every time he whips the head off of somebody, he holds it up in the air like, ah. So it's kind of caveman, barbaric like. They're basically barbarians at this point. And he starts to run after them, but then he sees his dead wife, lifts her up like a sack of potatoes, and then drops her, kind of like, well, that was fun while it lasted. And then he starts to angrily chase after them because he sees his partner dead. Spike is shooting him with arrows. He's just shrugging them off. And by the way, this entire time you see his penis all just swinging him back and forth, we flee in the breeze, as you can see, and he almost has Spike until he's shot with a dart that puts him to sleep, but while he's standing, he doesn't fall. The alpha zombie is he's just standing there, kind of deactivated, if you will. And in comes Dr. What's his name? Dr. Kelson, played by Ralph Fiennes. Apparently he's developed a concoction that allows him to temporarily put to sleep the alpha zombie. He doesn't really use it on the other zombies, he just uses it on the alpha. And it's fast acting. He says it's extremely fast, and he's, the doctor, he's rather funny in how he, talks. He even has coated himself in a certain chemical to look more like the Wade zombies, to keep them from detecting him. Kind of like he's kind of tamed them, I first thought of Michonne from The Walking Dead, because this movie kind of has The Walking Dead vibes. But then I was thinking the Whisperers, more like them, because they dress in zombie attire with the zombie mask and zombie skin, so that they can blend in with the zombies. The Walking Dead, the walkers, as they call them. Because the dead skin has no scent, so that's how they tell the living from the non-living. And so he does that to kind of blend in with them, I guess, to get by, and so they won't eat at him. But the alpha, he has that little dart. He said it's morphine, basically, but it's very high concentrates of morphine, so it puts him to sleep. And there's this nice little moment when he takes the head that the alpha had got. He's like, "Let go, Samson." I call this one Samson. He's been living here for 3 years. He's been living in the land for 3 years. So apparently he knows Samson. He's named him. He's dealt with this alpha before, and apparently this alpha inadvertently gets Dr. Kelson heads for his bone temple. Spoiler alert. I wasn't gonna spoil it, but I always end up doing that. Fuck. Anyway, yeah, you got the bone temple. You see him put the head inside the thing, the furnace, cleans off the skull, and tells Spike to put the skull somewhere. Then Spike tells the doctor why they're there, because the doctor asks, well, are you here because of the baby? Because, they tell him that they found the baby, and he's like, he's given birth by an infected, but he's not infected, and the doctor's like, interesting. I suspected as much, but the placenta is a wonderful thing. So apparently the doctor at some point has suspected that they could give both, that they can breed. More on that later, I guess, in part 2. But, or maybe part 3, I don't know. Back to the bone temple. Spike tells the doctor why he's there. Apparently the mother has cancer, and the doctor starts to work on diagnosing her. He doesn't have any diagnosing equipment or anything, but from what he can observe, because of the swelling of her lymph nodes and the way she acts, she has cancer. That's either made it to her brain from her body to her brain, or from her brain to her body, and it's malignant, meaning that it's spread, and she's gonna die soon. So she makes this plan for the doctor to hit her son with a blow dart, like morphine blow dart, to numb him, to put him to sleep, so to speak, while she orders him to do the same thing to her, but permanently, lethally. So it's assisted suicide. And then he, of course, traditionally bones her alive, takes the skull, gives it to Spike, tells Spike to place the head, give her a home, but this one is special amongst the rest because it's his mom, and he places it at the very top. And I want to spoil it a bit here. I make thumbnails, on my page, and I noticed the significance of this bone temple. I probably don't even have it, honestly. I thought I did. Apparently it's not there. Sorry. Anyway, there was an image somewhere with Spike climbing the bone temple to place his mother's skull at the very top. Anyway, after that, he takes the baby. They have this moment. The doctor tells him about what death is and how sometimes it's not so bad, and what death means, and everybody has to die, so to speak, kind of foreshadowing the death of his mother. But anyway, they have this moment where after this peaceful moment, they have this other moment where the Alpha catches back up with them. The doctor closes the door, and the Alpha's trying to get in, but then the Alpha finds another way to whip his hands through and damn near takes off the doctor's head, until Spike takes one of the doctor's darts and shoots it into the arm of the Alpha, therefore morphizing him again. The doctor says, I think this is about time for you to go home. Spike does go home, but only to deliver the baby at the front door, so that they can raise the baby while Spike continues to be in the mainland, the outside world. He continues to venture for some reason, because he's not ready to return home yet because of what happened to his dad and also his mom. So he sends his dad a message that he puts inside the baby's basket. That's why he dropped the baby off, but he also left a note in the basket so they can find it and it's a letter to his dad. His dad angrily runs out past the gates into the water, and he's holding the note, and he's yelling, Spike! But he can't move any further because the high tide set in. And I'm like, you didn't think to swim, man? Nah. Because he doesn't know what Spike is, and he obviously is not prepared. He just acted on impulse. fatherly impulse, Spike has decided to stay inside. Let me put this on full screen. I'm sorry. Spike has decided to stay on the mainland, in the outside world, because he wants to find himself. He wants to keep traveling until he can't see, until he can no longer see the sea. We see him cooking fish. He sees more mad zombies, and he shoots him some with arrows. But then he's about to be outnumbered. They steal his fish because they're hungry. One of them does anyway. And then after this, you see Jimmy come back. Jimmy from the beginning of the movie, played by Jack O'Connor from Sinners. He played Wemmick in Sinners. He's like, nice. He says, nice what you've done to the zombies. Head on. You're a good. You're a good shot. That kind of thing. Do you want? But it looks like you're about to be outnumbered soon. Do you want us to step in? Mind if we step in? And then Spike is like, yeah, sure, go ahead. I could use all the help. And they step in, and they very Power Rangers like flip over. I almost expected them to morph, start bashing heads and killing zombies and striking poses and shit and doing it in creative ways like they're having fun. Then eventually, the little Jimmy, played by Jack O'Connor, steps down and says, "Hi, Spike. Let's be pals." And it just cuts there. No ending credit scene, no post credit scene, no mid credit scene. That's it. Ends on a cliffhanger, and it's going to continue with that. With the Jimmys. They're all called Jimmy, by the way. They all look like him. He has blonde hair. And and so I noticed it was Jimmy. Well, I didn't really notice it was Jimmy until later. But he's wearing his dad's cross upside down, because in the beginning of the film, when Jimmy, I forgot to mention the beginning of the film, it shows the events of 28 days later. This little blonde-headed boy is watching Teletubbies. He's thinking that his parents are arguing or whatever, but apparently the raid zombies have gotten in, and it's this good little 2 minutes before you know about the raid zombies. Jimmy ends up running out of the house and away eventually. After seeing some people turn, like immediately, including his own mother, who had previously demanded that he run. He runs to his father's church, and his father ends up saying it's a glorious day because it's now, the end of the world. God is going to bring his judgment, kind of thing. Book of Revelation style. Book of Revelation, actually, single and there's no S. Remember that from Longlegs. And Jimmy's praying to God, and then the zombies break into the church, and they start to, bite his dad. And I think he tells his son to run. He still has that enough caring for his son eventually to tell him to run. Sorry, my eye kind of bothers me. And Jimmy is hiding in the floorboards while the zombies are rampaging. You see his father transform immediately. He starts to vomit as they always do, and then he joins their forces. It's just amazing, And then eventually, when the coast is clear, Jimmy runs away out of the church, and while he's running away, it's like he's holding his father's cross upside down. And I say that because later on, he wears that same cross because his father told him to never lose sight of it, always keep it with him. He hangs it but upside down because it's kind of like a renounce of his faith. Like, either that or he still believes in Jesus, but in a twisted way, to the point where he's, I guess, kind of like the Antichrist in a way, because, upside down cross. And it's also the way he was holding it when he was running away from the zombies. Because, obviously he remembers what happened to his dad, and he's like, what I learned in Sunday school was not what happened. This is not, obviously it contradicts what happened, and it just messes with my faith. But as we see Jimmy later on at the end of this movie, he has a cult of other Jimmys that have joined him. They're the ones that act like Power Rangers. Anyway, that's 28 years later, so I've damn near talked about it about an hour. It was good, minus a few scenes with audio. I just felt like the audio was some of the audio was not needed. Um, you know, because it's just kind of useless. Especially the whole squeal of the fat zombie. Like, why did it squeal like a pig? I still don't know that. Definitely a different 28 movie. It's I know I suck at this review thing, but it's not as bad as people say it is. Is it the best movie 2026, 2025? I don't know. You let me know. You tell me. Tell me in the comments what you think. What is your favorite 28 years movie? What is your favorite 28 movie? Is it 28 days, 28 weeks, or 28 years later? Are you looking forward to the second part, to the third part even? You want to find out what happens with Jimmy and Spike and his dad, Jamie? How about the doctor? What happens to them? The doctor played by Ralph Fiennes. Dr. Kelson, I think. What happens to him? What about the baby that he left at the, you know, village door? Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, like and subscribe. I give reviews every now and then. Most of the time I do live streams to see what other reviewers are talking about. Well, I still have to do that. See what they think of this film. See if they like it. This and Elio and even F1, which I want to see Monday. I get to see an early fan event of that. I'll have a review on that. I was planning on seeing Elio, but I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and peace.